Aphorism 2. How could something originate in its antithesis? Truth and error, for example? Or will to truth in will to deception? Or the unselfish act in self interest? Or the pure, radiant gaze of the sage in covetousness? Such origination is impossible. He who dreams of it is a fool, indeed worse than a fool. The things of the highest value must be able to have an origin of their own. They cannot be derivable from this transitory, seductive, deceptive, mean little world, from this confusion of desire and illusion. In the womb of being, rather in the intransitory, in the hidden God, in the thing itself. That is, where there must be cause must lie in nowhere else. This mode of judgment constitutes the typical prejudice by which metaphysicians of all ages can be recognized. This mode of evaluation stands in the background of their logical procedures. It is on this account of their faith that they concern themselves with their knowledge, with something that is at last solemnly baptized the truth. The fundamental faith of the metaphysicians is the faith in antithetical values. It has not occurred to even the most cautious of them to pause and doubt here on the threshold, or however it was most needful they should, even if they vowed to themselves the omnibus dudeandum. For it may be doubted, firstly, whether there exists an antithesis at all, and secondly, whether these popular evaluations and value antitheses on which the metaphysicians have set their seal are not perhaps merely foreground evaluations, merely provisional perspectives, perhaps moreover the perspectives of a hole and corner, perhaps from below, as it were frog perspectives, to borrow an expression employed by painters. With all the value they may adhere to the true, the genuine, the selfless, it could be possible that a higher and more fundamental value for all life might have to be ascribed to appearance, to the will to deception, to selfishness, and to appetite. It might even be possible what that constitutes the value of those good and related, knotted and crouched to these wicked, apparently antithetical things, perhaps, even in their being essentially identical with them, perhaps. But who is willing to concern himself with such dangerous perhapses? For that we have to await the arrival of a new species of philosopher, one which possesses tastes and inclinations opposed to and different from those of its predecessors, philosophers of a dangerous perhaps, in every sense. And to speak in all seriousness, I see such new philosophers arising. Aphorism 3. Having kept a close eye on philosophers, and read between their lines for a sufficient length of time, I tell myself, the greater part of conscious thinking must still be counted among the instinctive activities, and this is so even in the case of philosophical thinking. We have to learn differently here, as we have learnt differently in regard to heredity and the innate. Just as the act of being born plays no part in the procedure and process of heredity, so being conscious is in no decisive sense the opposite of being instinctive. Most of the philosopher's conscious thinking is secretly directed and compelled into defiant channels of his instincts. Behind all logic, too, in its apparent autonomy, there stand valuations. In plainer terms, physiological demands for the preservation of a certain species of life. For example, that the defiant shall be of greater value than the indefiant, appearance of less value than truth. But such valuations as these, their regulatory importance for us notwithstanding, be no more than foreground evaluations, a certain species of nocere, which may be necessary precisely for the preservation of beings such as us, assuming that is to say that it is not precisely man who is the measure of things. Welcome, everybody. Previously, on this episode of Dragon Ball Z, but previously of reading and analyzing Beyond Good and Evil, we read the preface and part 1, Aphorism 1 of On the Prejudices of Philosophers. Today, we read the second and third aphorism. What inside the preface and Aphorism 1, we're introduced to one concept that's in entirely Nietzsche's work, the will. But with this will, he uses a concept that's obsessive, reversal, still, cunning, reserved, and used for, air quoting, noble and high-minded people to a degree of the civilization they're in, so cultured people. He's using his concept and the obsessive concept of truth for a will to truth. That's an impulse, a instinctive impulse, though dispassionate, objective, and absolutist in point of view, to seek a truth beyond material, beyond the human mind, beyond the human body, and beyond physics, metaphysics. In the preface, he vividly describes the work that's grounded before us. And today, with Aphorism 2, he begins sarcastically of saying, why should it originate antithesis, this will to truth or will to deception? Why is it thought as unselfish act, as self-interest? This radiant gaze as covetousness. Such origination is impossible, thus say the prideful individuals who preach this will to truth. You won't hear them say the statement or the idea of the will to truth, but you'll hear words, sentences, statements, or theses that originate in the idea or in the reality of the will to truth. And his sarcasm continues that a fool dreams of this, and that it's worse to be that this dream is worse than to be a fool, and that the highest value originates on another on its own, something that's seductive, transitory, deceptive is with this little world, everything with its confusion of desire and illusion. So the person he's sarcastically portraying here is the philosophers, or everything outside the philosophers, with the artists, the artist in love, not the irrational artist in action, but the artist in love is spectating art from a distance and saying, what nice strokes from the brush, look at the paint, look at the framing, look how big this structure is. But what is it used for? What's the essence of this? Let me take it apart real quickly. And that's what he's saying here, but in the idealist form that this is transitory, it's illusory, deceptive, and that these irrational desires are hindering the truth, the good, the beautiful, the knowledge, in the realm of ideas, in the world of forms. And he continues with it as in the womb of being. So this is cooking, preparing, preemptively of the being, which is continuing a static and fixed reality, for a intransitory, a hidden God, a thing in itself with Immanuel Kant. And after imitating this idealist or philosopher or sober realist atheists of his time. And after his time, as I said previously, he had a great foresight of debate, not solely debating nor arguing, but calculating either, but psychologically reading and analyzing or evaluating what's happening before him, at his time, and after him. It continues saying that this mode of judgment constitutes a prejudice with the metaphysicians of every age, and that this mode of evaluation stands in their background as a shadow, not Carl Jung's shadow, but lurks as phantoms with their logical procedures, and that they put their faith in their knowledge, and that their knowledge is a baptized truth, solemn baptized truth. In reality, it's a fundamental faith of antithetical values with the metaphysicians. People label and name and title Nietzsche as a metaphysician. He's not a metaphysician as Martin Heidegger. If you read Martin Heidegger, observe the passages he writes of Nietzsche with skepticism and, or in Nietzsche's case, with a hammer, not to annihilate Heidegger, but to tap the bell of his knowledge and see if it rings correctly, if it sounds harmonic and pleasing to hear, or if it's unpleasant. Now, what is he saying? Why is he saying that this mode of judgment, with their truth, prejudice, procedures, knowledge, truth, why is he saying they're antithetical values from fundamental faith? They're antithetical values from how the philosopher is separating the world into two, a material and immaterial world, saying that the material world is impermanent, it's irrational, nothing's right, it's deceptive, why is there so much pain, agony, and that the items before us, something beyond our grasp of them, has a world inside itself. And that world inside and beyond itself, to add, is the truth, is the beauty, is the justice, etc., etc. But Nietzsche's saying, whoa, 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 whoa. That's not what's happening here. Not under my watch. So while he has his hammer over his shoulder, or people say he has his hammer over his shoulder. No, it's a miniature hammer. And he's tapping graciously on every bell of a philosopher, metaphysician, psychologist, atomist, everybody of his time that were seeking this truth. And unbeknownst to them, it's a unconscious deceit and a goal to manipulate others and manipulate and control others in their realm of spiritual will to power. You'll hear that again next week. But you'll hear that statement again, spiritual will to power. So he's discussing that while philosophers are seeking this truth, in reality they're seeking power and overpowering others as a form of strength, and that they separate this form of strength from the expression of strength. Nietzsche's concerned with the expression of strength, not strength or demanding or exhorting for strength. And this ties with how the physiological reality of how the philosopher sees, plus his psychological prejudice of the earth, saying, I want something beyond this. This realm, I don't want this. It must have a hidden source somewhere, and I will use my knowledge and my reason and everything in my power to seek this thing in itself. The thing in itself, its definition is the answer. The vague definition is, while extracting everything of an object that's impersonal to you and beyond your comprehension of it, the thing is left. That's the definition. The answer is the definition. And why discuss appearances in the first argument? Why not things in themselves? But that introduces a causality, a cause and effect. That's not the thing in itself. While discussing appearances that don't appear, why acknowledge appearance in the first place? That's the thing in itself. And that's what Nietzsche is alleviating the pressure, the immense pressure these philosophers had for millennia, but evaluating their prejudice. While he's questioning them, they don't question themselves with this terrific pride of the knowledge and the truth, and that they were selected for this truth, and that nature loves them. In reality, their perspectives and evaluations are provisional, cowardly, timid, and frog-like perspectives. And he says here, perhaps moreover, the perspectives of a hole and corner. That's timidity and defending yourself in a corner, saying, I know what it is, you just don't know it. This earth is bad. It has confusion and illusions, and it's this and it's that. I don't like it. That's the expression and confession of a philosopher. And to tie a definition I said earlier of the artist of perspective, it ties with the philosopher. While he's transient or temporarily existing on earth, he's spectating everything and saying, this is not the true beauty. This is not the justice. This is not what I was promised. So, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make something. I'm going to make an evaluation that's not likening. That's not the likening that I wanted of this earth. So, I'm going to make something beyond it. Metaphysics. That's the issue Nietzsche has with these philosophers. And he says it that they borrow an expression employed by painters because, ironically, they're wearing a mask that's true, authentic, and selfless. And he continues, higher and more fundamental value for all life might be ascribed to appearance, to the will to deception, to selfishness, and to appetite. Appetite in the sense that they are eager, starving, and hunting for victims to infest with their determinate and defiant values, or antithetical values. But while they're appearing as selfless, genuine, or authentic, and true, in reality, they're wearing a mask while shaking your hand with a gun behind their back, prepared to murder your selfhood and their great love for themselves for dependency, weakness, and reliance on them. And for them to operate your life while they continue their simplistic, simpleton lives as Kant. Because it's purported that due to his simple routine, you can set your watch to a specific time, and if you're outside in a cafe, or the coach, and you see Kant walking, and you repetitively use that same method again and again, you see him again and again and think, man, this guy has no life. And that describes his philosophy: a life-denying, anti-life, reserved and uniform, and Christian in another mask, or another form of Christianity in another mask. While he's saying this is what constitutes the value of those good and honored things resides precisely in their being artfully related, knotted, and crotched to these wicked, apparently antithetical things. That while the philosopher is presuming to be living a artful life, in reality he's still knotted, apparent, and antithetical to the vice, principles, values, and ideas to the previous and to the after philosopher of him. Perhaps even in their being essentially identical with them, perhaps, but who is willing to concern himself with such dangerous perhapses? For that we have to wait the arrival of new species of philosophers, who possess tastes and inclinations opposite to and different from the predecessors, aka the free spirits. Yes, Nietzsche's in a elitist, not political elitist, a biological elitist, because he realized that these philosophers are anti-biological, and they're producing the next generation of thought. So he's adamantly preferring the free spirits who possess a taste or inclination, aka instinct, for life, and that they possess the dangerous perhaps in every sense. And he said with the final 6 words, I see such new philosophers arising. Interpret that how you see. Nietzsche, Aphorism 2. In Aphorism 3, he's examining the philosophers again. This entire book. Oh, no. The entire first part is him observing why are people obsessed with the ideas and absolute knowledge and intelligence of these spectators of art and not irrational actors of art. So he's observing this philosopher and reading between the lines with some sufficient time, as he says, and he tells himself that the great part of conscious thinking is counted among the instinctive activities. And this is so even in the case of philosophical thinking. We have to learn differently here, as we have learned differently in regard to heredity and the innate. The conscious thinking and the instinctive activities are one, while people separate the two to consciousness. They say subconscious. I say there's no subconscious because it's another word for unconscious. While the two are separating terms with separating definitions, they're one in one action. And that instinctual activity and conscious thinking is tied in an inseparable reality, including the philosophical thinking. And it's time for us. This is the portion where I say to my audience, it's time to reevaluate and think differently and realize that not solely thinking, acting differently is a source of power, not indifference, not an instinct for self-preservation, because that self-asserts that it's a lie to sanctify and justify your false degree of pridefulness. So it's time for us free spirits to reevaluate every singular value we were once taught in a great mind-body connection. I almost said mentality, but your body represents your mentality. I digress. He continues saying, just as the act of being born plays absolutely no part in the process of heredity, so being conscious is no decisive sense the opposite of instinctive. Most of the philosopher's conscious thinking is secretly directed and compelled into defined channels by his instinct. That's complex. At first thought, you think, okay, so why is it not opposite? Why is it not the opposite sense of being instinct with the consciousness? That's because the philosopher or individual seeking dispassionately, soberly, objectively for this truth, while it's derived from a source of power, weak source of power, and arrogance, he's training, disciplining, and impressing these narrow, personal, and human, all too human, meaning common, ideas inside his mind as fixed ideas, while stopping the competition of other ideas to penetrate, overpower, and predominate the fixed ideas in his mind to become unforgettable. But with being conscious is, at the same time, not aware nor cognizant that you're preaching, deceiving, and manipulating / controlling the other person with the fixed ideas you've impressed in your mind while repressing the instincts. So this is a reactive instinct process with philosophical thinking. And this ties with the selfishness, deception, and appetite of the philosopher, plus with the value of the slave value of altruism. The psychological selfishness, selflessness, and compassion. We'll be discussing those ideas once we arrive at the religious section of Beyond Good and Evil and the entirety of On the Genealogy of Morals. But genealogy of morals irrelevant, the religious section here irrelevant, it's the prejudice of the philosopher. So while he's secretly directing and compiling these defiant channels or fixed ideas from his conscious thinking to the unconscious and becoming unaware or incognizant of what he's saying as deception, controlling, overpowering the person in front of him or the mass number of people he's deceived. And he says, behind all logic, too, is an apparent autonomy that stands evaluation. In plainer terms, a physiological demand for preservation of a certain species of life. This is the instinct of preserving yourself, becoming lazy or indolent, petrified, fearing of stepping outside your comfort sphere. And that conformity, materialism, and the pondering of immaterialism, aka the abyss, and nihilism overcoming you, that's what is preserving the species. You've plausibly heard the quote or the statement from Charles Darwin, survival of the fittest. It's not Charles Darwin, it was Herbert Spencer who exclaimed that quote. While he said that quote, he favored self-preservation. Not Charles Darwin. He preferred natural selection, a duplicate of the previous self. Both nihilistic and unnatural approaches to life. With life, the survival isn't merely self-preserving and existing, but primarily increasing power. While, air quoting, the fittest is the noble and free spirits respecting, loving, and affirming the pain and life as a creative source, and realizing that everything outside is folly and unnecessary for them. Because the true source is from inside, and that inside source is expressing and discharging, while self-preservation is a infrequent but direct result and a momentary peace before waging another war. Now, a longing peace or prolongation of said peace begins to deteriorate the power and suffocates the will to thrive. Apply what I said to what Nietzsche said in plainer terms: physiological demands for the preservation of a certain species of life. This physiological preservation of specific species of life is what the philosophers, and outside the philosophers, artists, religious, and scientists are initiating every singular day. Not at Nietzsche's time, not after his time, not before his time, every singular day. And he says, for example, that the defiant shall be of a greater value than the indefiant, appearance of less value than truth. To the philosopher, what is defiant is the great value than what's irrational or indefiant, and becomes a less transparent value for them than truth, because truth is a appearance for them. Once it becomes something from transparent to apparent to appear, or no, transparent to apparent, and in their hands, that's how it's named defiant. Everything outside that this defiant is folly to them. And he says with grand enthusiasm, but such evaluations as these, the regulatory importance for us notwithstanding, meaning we don't care, be no more than foreground evaluations, a specific species, which may be necessary precisely for the preservation of beings such as us. Assuming that is to say, that not precisely man who is the measure of things. Because while it's necessary for others, it's unnecessary for us. We preserve our beings for us. And that we realize that this preservation of a being is preparing physiologically, mentally, psychologically, and emotionally for the next war. That is to everything I have to say of Aphorism 2 and Aphorism 3. I'm rereading slowly both of them if I exclude something, and I'll say the aphorism aloud. And if spontaneously words and statements appear in my mind, I'll say them at a specific time. No, I've said everything. Well, there's one with aphorism two, but it's blatant now that firstly, whether there exists any antithesis at all, and secondly, whether these popular evaluations and value antitheses on which the metaphysicians have set their seal are not perhaps merely foreground evaluations, but perspectives. Nietzsche's saying perspective, perspective, perspective. He's repetitively saying perspective. It's because it's how they see reality. And if they're saying no, they're saying no, not literally saying no, but metaphysically, rationally, ideally, transcendentally, they're saying no to life. Them saying no to life isn't what is it their expression, but it's a confession of their psychology, of their character, of their values, and where they grounded their values at. That's saying everything for millennia, where I'm partially reiterating myself, but for millennia, we were said to have a pure, unfettered, and selfless, pitying, compassionate mind. And these philosophers are saying the same thing in other words, in euphemisms. And I'd say to myself, as a skeptic to a degree, and I use skepticism as a tool, another great statement of Nietzsche is that he realizes and devalues everything to a tool. But they're separate in their uses. Same with reason. He's not an irrationalist, nor a rationalist. He uses reason to its limited and judgmental degree. While judgment is another word for limit. And the judgment of the philosopher is limited of their experience of reality. They never seeked an opportunity to receive deepened and fruitful power because of their negativity to themselves. That translates to a negativity to life and everything involved life. Their opportunity for a fruitful and a deepened, passionate, and fruitful power is a result of them not seeking, of being unambiguous, neglecting their body's ability and not comparing, nor evaluating, nor critiquing, nor questioning themselves. That's everything I would say. There's possibly one one analysis I'm not saying. And I'll think it'll bombard me after once I begin thinking again and these ideas appear spontaneously in my mind. That's everything I have to say for Aphorism 2 and 3. Next week, we'll be reading Aphorism 4 and 5. If you love what you're hearing and you have an overwhelming desire to comment, question, or reflect of what I have said, do please comment, like, and subscribe. That's everything for today. I'll see everybody next week. Amor Fati. Remember to love your fate.